Hi everyone, this is Dr. Praveen Parmar from Vyapaar Jagat, and Vyapaar Jagat is a business media platform. And so generally, at Vyapaar Jagat, what we do is we are featuring out the business journeys, and we are sharing such kind of knowledge which is actually useful for the entrepreneurs, for the early risers or young entrepreneurs, right? And we do come up with a lot of interesting subjects. And so not only the content based stories and content based articles, we come along with a lot of the kind of webinars, lot of videos, and we also conduct certain video interviews of the successful entrepreneurs. And so that way we are spreading the knowledge to the entrepreneurs world, right? And so today we have Smriti Mirani, and she is she has she is an alumni of IIT Bombay, and she has done B Tech and M Tech in energy engineering. She is a researcher, and in fact she has done a lot of research on the emotional intelligence, and there are various subjects. And she is a very good mentor, and she is counseling to the students and parents, and she is associated with so many non-profit organizations where the social emotional learning is a subject where she conducts a lot of webinars, a lot of seminars. And that way she helps to the parents and to the students. And today we have a very interesting subject where through inspiring leadership through emotional intelligence, right? It's a very powerful subject. And so we are going to learn a lot many things when we talk about the leadership. So leadership is something which initiates, right, which ignites. And we are going to have the leadership again with the emotional intelligence. So let's have the fantastic webinar on this particular very interesting subject. And we have a very special speaker for this, Smriti Mirani. And now it's all over to you, Smriti.
Thank you so much, Dr. Praveen, for that lovely introduction. And I would also like to thank Vyapar Jagat for hosting me today. Um, so, as Dr. Praveen rightly mentioned, that I am currently a researcher on social and emotional learning, and today we will be talking about emotional intelligence, specifically in the context of professional growth and leadership. So, I would actually like to start with this beautiful saying by Jack Ma, where he talks about how Jack Ma, who is actually the co-founder and CEO of Alibaba Group, he says in one of his interviews with World Economic Forum that I always try to find people who are smarter than I am, and then my job is to make sure that all of these smart people can work together. He then actually goes on to add that it's not simple to make smart people work together. So today we are actually going to talk about what are these qualities that the richest man in China and a pioneer in himself, he talks about, and how can we learn from the best case studies out there on emotional intelligence to take a leap in our professional journeys. Today, I actually hope to. We only have an hour today, and it's the topic that we've chosen is very very broad. What it is, why it's important, and of course, what can we do and how can we become more emotionally intelligent. We'll try to also look at certain stories and the science that is available behind emotional intelligence and its importance. At the uh, Towards the end of the session, we'll actually invite all of you share any questions or have with us. So let's begin our conversation today with a story. So this is Phineas Gage, who actually lived in the 19th century. He is actually a spectacular case study, and neuroscientists have actually studied his brains for decades now. Uh, his brain is actually on display in the Harvard Medical School right now, and I'm actually going to tell you his story today. So Phineas Gage was a rail construction foreman, and he was actually the best at what he did. His technical skills and capabilities were amazing. He People who worked with him, they actually loved him, and they actually loved working with him. He was able to remain calm and composed under stressful situations, and he always knew how to work with large teams of people in order to achieve his goal. Now, one fine day, when they were actually working through a tunnel and sort of blasting the tunnel in specific ways to lay the railroads over there, he met with an accident. As you can see, the rod that he is holding, due to a blast that went off, this particular rod went through his left eye, cracked his skull, as you can see, and it landed behind him, like way far behind him, probably with a part of his brain. Now, surprisingly, Phineas survived this accident, and he took about 6 months to recover from his physical injuries. And surprisingly, most of his brain functions were also not harmed. But there was actually one change in his behavior. His technical skills, mind me, his technical skills had still not changed, and he was still very, very smart, and he knew what he was doing. However, like what we call as his people skills had actually now changed. So a person who earlier was able to be calm in tough situations, now he was somebody who would lose his temper. He was somebody that people could not tolerate working with, and he would actually shout and scream at his subordinates more often than before. What this story actually tells us is that a man of impeccable technical skills, if that person lacks what we call now as emotional intelligence, that person can be very, very difficult to work with. And more often than not, this particular person would not make it very far in his or her career. So, what why should we talk about emotional intelligence in this context? So I would love to share with you that there are multiple courses that are actually run by MBA colleges, even offline and online. So if you go to Coursera, you will actually find two brilliant courses on emotional intelligence in the context of leadership, one of which is actually by a top MBA college here in India, Indian School of Business. So why is emotional intelligence relevant? For a long time now, we have been talking about and we have been obsessing over IQ. Now, you may be surprised to know that IQ only contributes to about 10 to 20% of our success, but it's actually EQ which was brought to the map, and EQ is something that actually has more to do in determining your success than IQ. Another interesting thing about EQ and IQ is that IQ actually matures at around age 17 in individuals, and it fairly remains constant and unchangeable throughout our lives. But EQ, emotional quotient, is something that we can actually learn and we can actually enhance in ourselves. EQ is actually becoming one of the most sought after skills, or actually a must have skill, which people look for even when they hire new people for their organizations. So, as many as 20% organizations, they have systemic processes to actually measure EQ before they hire a candidate. And the hype about EQ is actually very, very understandable. If you see here, 90% of top performers or leaders, they actually have high EQ. And as we were discussing, like EQ is responsible for our success more than IQ. And a survey actually shows that EQ is responsible for 58% of our job performance. There's also a lot of case studies that actually show that when an organization has people with higher emotional quotient, they do not change jobs frequently, so they have people who stay for a longer time in their firms. So as a leader of a small team, or as a leader of a big organization, I think this is something that should be your top priority, to also look at emotional quotient of your employees. And lastly, people on a personal level, people with higher EQ, they actually go on to make almost like $29,000 annually, more than their colleagues who have low EQ. So, this actually brings us to the question that if, let's say, we now understand that emotional intelligence is very, very important wherever you go, and you cannot do without it, and you cannot surpass it just by having enough good technical skills. So, what do we even mean by EQ? What do we even mean by emotional intelligence? And yes, who needs emotional intelligence? So, uh, do people who uh, who are very, very socially awkward, or who do not know how to speak to each other, or who do not know how to communicate, are those people the only ones who need emotional intelligence, or to enhance their skills on emotional intelligence? Not really. All of us, as you may agree, all of us, we actually encounter so many uh, conflicts, so many decisions to make. uh, we see ourselves in situations where we are trying to work together with people, as we started our topic today, that working with people is also not an easy task. So all of us who find ourselves in these situations, all of us, we need a crash course on emotional intelligence. So I would actually like to pause here for about a minute or so, and I would like to invite you to share some or the other incident that you feel happened to you, or you were actually sort of leading, where something uh, did not go right due to the lack of emotional intelligence. So, to give you an example, it can be a situation that could have been better handled with emotional intelligence, but it wasn't handled very well in that moment. So, I would love to hear from some of our participants as to what do they feel, and what are their experiences about this. So, if you want, I can actually repeat the question. Uh, recall a situation from your um company, or in your experience, in your professional experience, when a certain situation or a challenging situation was not handled in the best possible way. You could have been part of that situation, or you could have just witnessed or heard about that situation. That is also okay. Okay, all right. So moving on, let me actually tell you a few things that I have heard about. So a friend actually tells me that in a disagreement that he had with his boss actually absolutely refused to look at his point of view and his ideas, even though they were probably like as good, if not better than his boss's ideas. And uh, this person actually eventually in 2 months or so, he actually ended up changing teams because he absolutely could not get along with his boss. So this is one very simple example of like situations that can go right when they're not handled very well. Another example that I would like to share is, let's say, and this is very very common, and a lot of my friends have actually shared this with me. Taking credit for each other's work in the workplace, and sort of overselling what you have done, and sort of stealing somebody's work as your own. So this is also another example of uh, an environment which is not very conducive and does not welcome everybody, and it leaves people feeling that they are not appreciated enough. I would love to know from all of you if you have any such instances to share with us, and I would sort of love to discuss any of those as well. Now, let's talk about what is emotional intelligence. What do we even mean by emotional intelligence? So, when we talk about emotional intelligence, there are a few myths that are associated with it. So, at times we talk about, so emotional intelligence is actually simply the ability to manage ourselves, and thus our goals, and the people around us, or our relationships effectively. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's actually uh, contrary to common belief. It's not just being emotional, but it's actually a set of complex skills that allows us to do the following: to manage ourselves and to manage our relationships effectively. Now, we actually use this term very often, which is actually a term called people smart. That this person is people smart or has a lot of social skills. So let's try to go over what are some of the skills that we include when we talk about emotional intelligence. So, this is actually a model which was proposed by Daniel Goleman, who actually references Soloway as the person who came up with this model. So, it talks about 5 key aspects of our social and emotional skills. So, these 5 competencies are, so the first one is self awareness, or what is it that you are feeling. So are we even aware of what we are feeling as we are feeling those emotions? So that is the first criteria of emotional intelligence. The second criteria is actually that of self-regulation. So when we once know our emotions, uh, let's say I am very, very angry because of something, am I able to control my anger, or do I give in to my impulse to just uh, do I give in to my impulse and just burst out on the first person that I see? So that actually involves self-regulation, where we are able to understand and manage our emotions well. Then we go on to talk about motivation. Now, this is actually a key concept where we actually talk about self motivation, where we talk about conquering our emotions to go on to achieve our goals. This particular topic actually includes a lot of other key concepts which are necessary for any person to achieve their goals. Concepts like that of mastery. When we talk about mastery, we talk about what is it that we can do, or what is the process of gaining mastery over a particular technical or cognitive skill. This particular aspect of motivation also includes what we call as flow. So when we are in the state of flow, uh, we actually are so involved in whatever it is that we are doing, that it gives us immense pleasure to be working on that thing. Now, this is something that we can actually come back to later, which is very, very important for even children today, to sort of really learn the skill of how to enjoy something that they're doing, how to even enjoy hard work for that matter, actually. The fourth thing that we talk about when we actually talk about emotional intelligence is that of empathy. Now, empathy is something that is probably a very, very um, underrated thing. It's being talked about these days. So, what do we mean by empathy? Empathy is actually how we understand and uh, know about what the other person in the situation wants, or how the other person is feeling. So it would actually involve two key aspects. So, are you able to be compassionate towards the other person, and are you able to see their perspective? In So let me take a quick example here. So this might be a little controversial example, but I want to give a disclaimer that I'm not trying to hurt anybody's sentiments, but it's just a very, very objective example. So just yesterday, I was watching on the news that there were some doctors who were attacked when they went to a community to check people and test people for corona. Now, these people were actually angry that they don't even have food to eat, and which is why they attacked the doctors. So, um, the idea is, if, let's say, I wanted to show empathy for the people who threw the stones, um, I would try to think, or try to think what situation they are in. So, what could be the different possibilities? Is a human being, can a human being be so bad, like, for the lack of a better word, uh, can a human being be so bad that they attack somebody for no reason, or they show these kind of emotions for no reason? Probably not. So if we try to think about what those people are going through, then we may sort of think that they might be like absolutely they do not have jobs right now. They do not have any savings, maybe they are not able to even fetch their next meal. And what would I feel if I were in their situation and facing all of these circumstances? Now, let's talk about the doctor. The doctor who was actually attacked, he was being interviewed and he was talking about how he was feeling when he was attacked. And he actually went on to say that if I were, I'm very, very open to treating people, but I would probably not go back to the communities to bring people or test people for corona anymore. Now, the doctor's perspective, if you try to see, the doctor would be feeling like a sense of fear. Imagine that you're just trying to do your job, and you have to be afraid that you can be attacked by anybody from anywhere at any moment. So the constant fear when that doctor is actually putting we mean by empathy, and that is something that it's very, very crucial when we talk about professional settings, and even as a leader, to have a sense of empathy for the people that you're working with. And the last thing that we actually talk about when we talk about emotional intelligence is actually social skills, or how is it that you manage your relationships well with people. So when we talk about this, uh, we actually also consider things like when people are naturally very, very popular, or there are people who know so many other people and are liked by so many other people. All of us know some such individuals in our lives. So that is, and we know like what else we mean by social skills. Now, uh, the composition of all of these things would actually be very, very crucial to make a good leader. So, what would you like to say about how are you trying to, let's say, if you feel that emotional intelligence is something that you want to improve upon, then how is it that you would like to go about it? So, Uh, let's talk about a few common phrases that we actually end up using. So now, when we are talking about how can we become more emotionally intelligent, so we'll talk about some very, very basic things that we can actually identify in ourselves, and then we can try to work upon these things. So, some of these phrases will be very, very familiar to all of us, and I would love if the participants could share if they've said this themselves or they have been at the receiving end of this, and which one. So, these phrases are, oh, I told you so. I told you this would happen. Not my fault. Like whatever happened, that is not my fault, not my job. The third one is, it's not that big a deal. The context being, let's say, if somebody is, uh, let's say, overreacting or reacting to a situation, and sometimes we end up saying, oh, it's not a big deal. You're making such a big deal out of this. The fourth is that there is no reason to be upset. Being said, um, and the last one is, why don't you just try this? Or why don't you just do this? So I would love to hear from you that which ones have you either said or been at the receiving end of? And do you think this is something that a person with high emotional intelligence would say? Yes. So Priyanka is sharing that it's not that big a deal, or that's no reason to be upset. It's something that she has been probably said, or somebody has said to her. Preeti is saying that like her something that she has observed is, why don't you just try this? Hmm. So what is wrong with sharing that it's not that, excuse me, what is wrong with these phrases? So the first thing is that when you say certain things like these, uh, are we being aware of what the other person is feeling? So let's say, let's talk about the first one, which is actually over. And this situation is already over, and the situation is actually over, and we cannot do anything more about that situation. And there is somebody or some person who, like whatever that situation was, let's say I was trying to run a marathon, maybe, and that person kept telling me that you cannot run a marathon. Let's say I try to run a marathon and I fail. Would it be the best thing to tell me that, oh, I told you so, कि ऐसा होगा, this will happen? Probably not, because that situation is already over, and this does not do any good by holding on to that sense that, okay, I already knew this would happen, or I can predict future, so I knew that this would happen in this exact same way. Let's move on to the third one. It's not that big a deal. So when we actually in our organization Council, we actually work with children, and we work with them on emotions, on their social and emotional skills. So when we talk to them about this, we always tell them that it's okay to feel anything that you're feeling. Your emotions are valid. It's okay to feel anything that you're feeling. Your emotions are valid. So, here, when I say that it's not that big a deal, or you are overreacting to something, it actually means that I am saying to that person that your emotions are not valid, which is actually a very, very bad way to make somebody feel. Similarly, when you say to somebody that there's no reason to be upset, and this is actually something that I've actually said a friend of mine, that, oh, this is such a small thing, that is no reason to be upset, and we've fallen for these ones, right? And the last one is also amazing, when we try to advise somebody without usually trying to know the whole situation. So imagine that I am facing a challenge, let's say at work, or imagine a boss and a person in their team. The person goes to the his or her manager with a problem, and let's say without understanding the problem in detail, and without understanding what that person has already tried. Imagine if the boss would tell you, yeah, why don't you just do this? That actually, the reason why you should not say something like this is that you are dismissing the other person as if uh, they don't even have any common sense, that you don't even know the simplest of this thing. And let me tell you, like the solution to this thing is just so simple. So it actually makes them feel that they are not good at what they do, or they don't have the common sense, and it actually they actually take a hit on their self confidence if we try to say something like this to people we work with. So, what are some things that people with a little more or higher emotional intelligence usually say in conversations? So, yeah, let's take a look at this list and see if it's like very difficult to say these things. So the first thing that people with higher emotional intelligence they do is they ask for more information. They are very very good listeners. So something like, tell me more, could you elaborate? That is something that you are genuinely interested in, in knowing more about the situation before, as a team member or as a leader, you contribute more to that particular situation. And the second is actually, again, very beautiful and very very concise, that are you okay? When we work together, and even when I work with people, with my team, in my organization, we actually, more often than not, there are things that go wrong in people's personal lives as well. Let's face it, it's not possible for us to completely separate the personal and the professional. So it's very obvious that if somebody's mother is not well at home, she would have a tough time to actually do her job, and she might be a little distracted during that time. So, showing some empathy and some compassion towards your team members and checking on them eventually would actually, can actually go a long way. The third thing is something that I try to do very very consciously with my team. Uh, so that actually does two things. So the third thing is, what are your thoughts? What is your opinion? Now imagine a time when your opinion was not heard at all, and people treated you as if you were invisible. And imagine a space or a person who actually respects your opinions and your thoughts and your ideas, and tries to incorporate as many ideas as possible in the given time frame. So the second thing that this does, apart from give the person the confidence that they are in a space where their opinions and ideas matter, the second thing that it does is it actually enables them to at times even think outside the box. Uh, Imagine a workplace where the leader always has the answers. The leader always has the solutions to all the problems. Do you think the people in his or her team will be able to develop their skills? Another interesting thing that a friend of mine shared with me, that in her sales team, she said, their manager actually made everybody else so dependent on him. For example, if somebody wanted a raise, the manager would go and talk to the concerned people on behalf of their team. If they found themselves in a tricky situation, guess who solved that situation? So, by always just protecting your team, are you really building their skills, and are you really challenging them to learn these different skills and different and develop their strengths, or are you really harming them in the long run? The fourth thing is actually something which is also very very amazing, that I have a different perspective. So rather than saying something like, oh, that's such a bad idea, like how can you say something so stupid, or but we should do it like this, and just throw in your idea. So this is something that again always works, where you try to say that, okay, I have a different perspective and this is what I had in mind, and this is why uh, I am thinking the way I am thinking. And the last one is, I hear you. I hear you is actually a beautiful phrase that acknowledges somebody's feelings or somebody's opinions, like when said with in a genuine manner. So all of these things are actually examples of people exhibiting some high emotional intelligence. Now, you may be able to see that in these two different examples, people in the first case, like we were probably walking all over the emotions of the other people, and in the long term, we ourselves would not feel great about that. However, in this context, when we talk about or we use phrases like these, uh, you actually build a harmonious team that actually builds a very strong bond with each other, and then uh, that actually shows that this team would then go on to work longer hours. These people would stay in their jobs for higher like longer time than people. So these are just some examples of how you can increase your emotional intelligence. Now, speaking of five things and the five skills that we spoke about, I would actually like to cover some very basic things that you can actually add to that all of us can actually add to our toolkit to become more emotionally intelligent. So some of these things are uh, whenever we are faced with intense emotions, the first things that we can do are identify the triggers and pause. So let's take the example of anger once again. If I am an angry person, and if I have a very short temper, when I identify the triggers, that okay, what is it that even triggers this anger, I am becoming more self-aware, and I am sort of preparing myself for um, to deal with that anger and to deal with those emotions. Now, pausing is something that is works beautifully in such situations, where you just take a very quick pause before you say something that you might regret later. The second thing is actually to be accountable. Now, this actually comes under the category of self management. So, when we talk about especially the workplace, we there are so many avenues where we can falter, right from coming late to work and faltering on our deadlines, and we've all probably been there, where we have some or the other excuse, and always like somebody else is to blame rather than ourselves. So in these cases, uh, we usually notice that an emotionally intelligent person is a person who actually takes accountability or takes ownership of his or her work and his or her mistakes. So you will actually find an emotionally intelligent person saying that yes, this was actually my mistake, and like this is why this particular thing went wrong, rather than giving away the blame to somebody else and not dealing with the consequences of that. I would like to make a side note here that this is not a like you must understand this aspect well before just taking up ownership for your mistakes. Let's say if your company or the organization that you're working with does not really have a culture of people owning up to their work or mistakes at all, then you will probably be the scapegoat, and people will sort of use this quality of yours. They can use it in a negative way as well. The third thing that we can do to become a little more emotionally intelligent is listen. And when I say listen, really listen. So imagine the time where you were trying to share something with somebody, or let's say in a meeting, you were trying to say something, but you were actually cut off, and you weren't heard. When you are a leader, listening is something that is very, very crucial in order to even, that is the first step to even understanding what the people around you really want. What are their needs? What are their desires? How are they feeling? All of these things eventually, if you have a habit of listening to people, and listening with by keeping your biases aside. The fourth thing that actually we can do is something very, very important that we fail to understand in most situations. Identifying body language and sort of using a body language that is calming for ourselves, and which also communicates that I trust you and I can be trusted. So, I would like to share a beautiful story that Daniel Goleman actually talks about in his book. So, the story goes this way. Um, in a foreign country, there was a group of army troops were actually stationed in a foreign country. Now, this is actually in the context of the US Army, and they were in a country where they did not even know the language of the local people. So, one fine day, what happens is when the army men were going for their regular rounds, they saw that a mob was approaching them, and the mob did not look happy. The mob of people, like there were hundreds of people, and they looked extremely angry. uh, it turns out that the mob had been told, rumors had been spread that the army men were coming to arrest their local leader, which wasn't actually true. In that quick moment, what the army general did was that he made a very, very unique decision. What he did was, he was very quick to judge the situation, and he when he was looking for options, that okay, what is it that I can do in this situation, what he finally did was he asked all of his army men to kneel, to sit down and kneel before the mob, before the mob could actually get to them, and he asked all his army men to point their guns towards the ground. In such a gesture, which is usually unheard of in case of army men, he actually, without the use of any language, he actually communicated to them that we are not here to cause any harm. Due to that quick thinking, and because he could understand the emotions of the crowd, and he could rely that okay, like if I say something as bizarre as oh kneel and point your guns to the ground, my men will still follow me, and they will trust me. Because of these things and his quick thinking, he was able to avoid a very, very messy situation. And this is actually something that always gives me so much inspiration, that emotional intelligence, social intelligence can actually uh, be a lifesaver in certain situations as well. The last thing that in this particular thing that I would like to talk about is uh, praise. Now, this is actually something that also works wonders in terms of parenting, and it's actually a godsend when you acknowledge and praise somebody heartily. There was actually a study which was done where uh, college students, they were volunteering to make phone calls for donations. So they did this study in two parts. In the first scenario, their manager, they would not show them any they would not show any pleasant attitude towards the students making these phone calls. In the second scenario, however, this person would make sure to praise the students and would make sure to thank them for their time and efforts. The second group went on to make 50% more calls than the first group. So, something as simple as acknowledging, praising, and showing gratitude for somebody's good work can go a long way as a leader. Now, we've actually walked through a few very, very simple strategies which can help us increase our emotional intelligence. And I would like to, if we have any questions, we can actually take some questions. If not, I would love to talk about a few more slightly, I would say, higher order skills that we can talk about when it comes to emotional intelligence. Okay, we have a question where somebody is saying, how can we get work done as a leader when your group is not very supportive? Okay, so there are a few things where that we can look into So, in my opinion and in my knowledge, two things can be looked at when when a group is not very supportive towards the leader. So the first thing that the group or the team should be buying in is the vision or the work that is being done. So, for example, people who find like meaning in the work that they do, uh, like you cannot. It's very underrated. Like if you are able to find meaning in the work that you do, then you actually outperform so many of your colleagues. You must have heard this story where a person actually three people are asked what they are doing. Um, so one of them, he says that I'm laying bricks. One of them, the second says that I am making a room, and the third person actually says that okay, I am building a school. So the third person who says that I am building a school actually sees the meaning in the work that the person he or she is doing. So that is the first thing that we need to sort of look into. The second thing that we should be looking at is uh, whether or not the team and the people are being able to connect with the leader. So, as a leader, it's important for us to go that extra mile to ensure that everybody is getting tasks that they are capable of doing. Now, this is something that I constantly relook at myself when I get new people in my team and try to work with them on things that are within their skill sets. So these are the two things that can be looked at when we have a team that is not very supportive. All right. So with that, I would like to talk about um, a few more strategies that are actually will actually also debunk a few myths that we have. So the first strategy or the first thing is actually the ventilation fallacy, or when we vent to somebody when we are angry. So venting is something where you just recall the whole thing and you share the whole thing with somebody with so much anger. A common example actually would be, let's say if you're frustrated while driving and you keep honking at the person who is in front of you and you feel that it makes you feel better. So Goldman says that this is actually wrong and it actually prolongs your anger rather than make you feel good about it. So that is something that we can actually discuss in detail later on if we want. The second thing that I would like to talk about is when, let's say, we talk about the emotion of sadness, we actually get into the habit of ruminating, which is the action of thinking and rethinking about something that has already happened. When we do that, that is something which is bound to cause us more sadness and depression. Instead of that, Goldman actually recommends that we can distract ourselves, and he also recommends a few other things to do when you're sad. So, one of those things is to exercise, because he says that exercising is something that elevates you while sadness is something that is a low arousal state. So, aerobic exercise actually really helps when you're sad as well. The other thing that actually helps here is rethinking the thought that is making you sad. So that actually is a technique where you try to become aware of your thoughts, and you try to look at what can I think about instead. So for example, let's say you get into a fight with your boss, and your boss actually scolds you for not doing something and not finishing something within time. Now you feel very upset that and the first thought that comes to your mind is that my boss is always so rude, and like my boss does not like me. But can you relook at this thought and think about something which could be a different thought, that okay, maybe my boss has had a bad day today, and maybe he or she wasn't in a very good mood today. So that is something that these are techniques that we can use when we are sad. The third thing is like how to critique somebody using uh, a language that is not very hurtful. So, for example, uh, like imagine if you're a leader, if you're a boss, and you tell somebody you screwed up. Uh, does that help that person? So rather than saying you screwed up or you are an idiot or you are stupid, rather than saying that, a better way of critiquing somebody or giving somebody feedback would be to talk about what is it that they can do better. So something on these lines you can say to your team members that the report that you gave me actually can be made better in these few areas where I have written a few feedback comments. And why don't you look at this report in and also incorporate these particular aspects before we submit it to our clients, or we submit it to our director. The key thing that helps here is to be very specific, uh, to make sure that you use a language which also includes suggestions for what that person can do better, and um, make sure that you have empathy and compassion while giving this feedback or critiquing the work of your team members. The last thing that I would like to sort of touch upon in our conversation today is that emotions are contagious. It's actually our brains have mirror neurons that actually mirror to a certain extent, of course, the emotions of the person that we are with. So let's say there's a very expressive person in the room, and that person, let's say that leader, is very excited and is very happy. those emotions are actually very, very contagious. So this can actually also be done by leaders actually also do this by giving very, very inspirational speeches, and that is how they can also not only manage how they feel, but they can actually, like, good leaders can actually manage how a group of people or their team also feels. So that is actually my last takeaway that I would like to leave you with for today, which is that emotions are actually contagious like a virus. So you might want to also be very, very mindful of what kind of emotional energy you're actually bringing into that room. So, with that, I would like to close today's session, and I would like to leave the floor open. If we have any comments or any questions from our participants, I would humbly like to thank you for being with us today. And once again, I would like to thank Vyapar Jagat for their support and for having me here today. Thank you so much. We'll now wait for a few more minutes if we have any questions. We are getting a few points from people, comments from people. Athri is saying and sort of mentioning the point which we discussed about the leader enabling their team members to learn new things. And yes, thank you. Yes, so Nandini is also saying, asking that in a state of anger, what are the alternatives if not venting? Yes. So, some of the things that we actually do to manage our anger, as we know that we can distract ourselves, we can drink a glass of water, etc. The three key points that Daniel Goleman actually mentions are to uh, take deep breaths. Actually, this is the most underrated technique, and it's actually the most effective technique to take a few deep breaths. Let's say maybe 3 deep breaths would be enough to sort of calm your anger and let that 6 second window pass at least. The second thing that Daniel Goleman actually mentions is to take a walk. So he actually says that you can take a quiet walk when you're not thinking of the things that made you angry in the first place. You're not you're staying away from these anger provoking thoughts, and you're taking a walk or doing something where you are trying to distract yourself from these emotions. And the third thing that he mentions is the technique that we talked about in dealing with sadness. When we are talking about anger as well, we can actually think of reframing or re-looking at the situation. So let's say we are angry. So take a step back and think about what is it that you're angry about, and then what is it that you can really uh, think of or rethink about in that situation. So if I were to take an example, it would be, let's say I'm very angry about the current situation, that I am that is one way of thinking, that I am stuck in my home, I cannot go anywhere, etc., etc. But if I were to catch these thoughts and if I were to rephrase these thoughts, it would be very, very useful to deal with my anger in the first place. So I can actually think that, okay, I'm able to spend some very, very quality time with my family. I can think about how it's still very, very comfortable for me, while it might not be very comfortable for people out there who are probably either homeless or daily wage workers, or people who are working in critical situations right now. So a little mindset shift here would actually also go a long way. All right. So on that note, I would actually like to thank all of you for spending your evening with me today. And I hope that the information and the insights that I was able to cram in this 1 hour on emotional intelligence were enough to get you curious about this topic, and will sort of help you take a few steps towards being more emotionally intelligent and aware. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Praveen. Thank you, Vyapar Jagat, for this beautiful opportunity. And with that, bye, everybody. Please take care, be safe, and be happy. Thank you. Bye, everybody.